So good to be back with you. In the name of God, who is love, beloved, and love overflowing. Amen. So the collect of the day this morning had us asking God to increase in us true religion. And as is the case with most philosophy and religion, depending upon one's bias, the word religion may mean different things to different people. I recently read an old article by an author named David Lettier, which was about his opinion that nobody really knows where that word religion originated. We certainly have lots of ideas about what it means, but there are indeed lots of definitions. He quotes Thomas Paine, who once said that the word religion is a word of forced application when used with respect to the worship of God. Not a very flattering definition, to say the least. And then Lettier goes on to cite a couple of other definitions that have been around for a very long time. Christian philosopher Lactantius, who lived from 240 to 320 in the Common Era, said that the word religion comes from the Latin verb religare, which means to bind, as in somebody binding themselves to a vow. So you might include monks and nuns with that. You might, you could broaden that definition to say we're bound to our baptismal vows. And certainly the prophets certainly had their own personal feelings that they were bound to serve the Lord in a particular way. Then Roman statesman Cicero linked religion to the Latin word relegere, meaning to go through or go over again in reading, speech, and thought. So to go over something, and perhaps theologians might fall into that category. And then finally, Thomas Aquinas, who borrowed heavily from St. Augustine, said that the word religion comes from the Latin verb religere, meaning to recover. And this interpretation harkens back to Roman Catholic theology, where we have in some way lost God and are trying to get back to him. So if we're asking God for something, and we have all those different definitions out there, I think it's really important that we get clear what it is we're actually asking for when we say increase in us religion. I know an awful lot of people who absolutely want nothing to do with religion, plenty to do with spirituality, but not necessarily religion, because their experience of organized religion has not been the most positive experience. And so when they hear the word religion, they think rules, regulations, how do we exclude people, and so forth. And also, these days, very few people want any more demands made on their time. They have people, family, friends, employers, the IRS is all making demands on their time. So you can imagine that some of those folks would say, I don't want another responsibility. So here's what I think. To me, to pray for an increase of religion means both a desire to draw closer to God, as well as something very unpopular, a desire to change. And that desire is even just a tad bit different from a willingness to change, right? We can all want to change, but we don't necessarily want to go through the steps that would create that change. So there's a couple of different ways of looking at that. And so it seems to me that every religion asks of their followers that they change to be more like their religious founder. As Christians, we're called to become more Christ-like, to act more in accordance with the image of God in whom we believe we were made, and which has been modeled for us, particularly in the work and person of Jesus Christ. For Buddhists, It means dedicating themselves to the Eightfold Path, to be transformed into Buddha nature. And for Jews, it's going to mean something very different again. Perhaps following all 613 rules that are laid out in the book of Leviticus, and hopefully in Torah in general, and hopefully to attain to some sort of idea of holiness that maybe Moses or David or one of the prophets they feel has attained. For some, asking for an increase in religion gets horribly misinterpreted as an increase in religiosity. Very easy trap to fall into. I don't really think that that's what Moses, David, Jesus, or Muhammad ever wanted, because when you think about it, that's more about the ego. Religiosity, yeah. Richard Rohr has said many times, religion is one of the safest places to hide from God. Whoa, now that's getting down to it. Religion is one of the safest places to hide from God. Why? Because it's so much easier to be meticulous and judgmental about things like church attendance, and whether you light one candle before the other, or whether you're using rite 1 or rite 2, and all these little things that we've used in terms of church practices or beliefs, rather than living fearlessly in the world by practicing self-reflection, loving others extravagantly, and having a willingness to change and really trust God when we don't even know what the future brings. That's the hard work. Religiosity is a piece of cake. We can always condemn ourselves and others for not doing things the way somebody says they ought to be done. But true willingness to change, that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of true religion, I believe. As you probably know, personally, I think religion is a God-given tool to help us evolve. And forgive me if I've said it before, but it's not easy to evolve, right? A lot of people really seriously choose not to. They think, give me that old time religion and I don't want to change anything from that. I want to stay in Mayberry, We get more comfortable as life becomes predictable. But when it becomes unpredictable, we end up suffering because we're holding on to something of the past that, frankly, anything in the past is a canceled check. It's done. So what are we actually holding on to? It's the present moment that we have to let go of everything that's gone before us and start fresh with a new attitude towards our life, our families, and everything in general. And so that letting go process, that letting go of all the predictable ways we had hoped life would be, that's the hard work of transformation and evolution. That was the case for poor Jeremiah, who in today's Hebrew Scriptures passage is very busy complaining. I mean, he knew that serving God would not be an easy deal. He was, as all the prophets are, chosen to speak truth to power, to create change. But he had no idea just how hard that was going to be and how much he would suffer for being God's mouthpiece for that change. So it should be shocking when you hear the Hebrew Scriptures reading we heard today, when Jeremiah says to God, "Truly you are to me like a deceitful brook, like waters that fail." That is shocking, right? For a prophet to say to God. But how does God respond? If you turn back, I will take you back and you will stand before me. That's the good news that's embedded today in the Hebrew Scriptures reading. You can get mad at God. You can voice all the frustrations you want to God. He's not going to take it personally, or she's not going to take it personally. God, our mother and father. It's okay to be authentic with all of your feelings with God, because God knows them anyway, right? So why fake it? God understands it isn't easy being human, never mind green, right? And it certainly isn't easy speaking truth to power. I believe God completely understands how difficult it is to suffer, and beautifully and lovingly never holds our frustrations against us. And that's good news too. And I think Paul hints at the meaning of true religion when he exhorts the people in a different passage to not be conformed to this world, but to the renewing of our mind. You know, those of us who like everything kind of predictable and in control, we don't realize the renewing of our mind means we're not going to have complete control of everything. We're going to be open to changing over and over and over again throughout our life. Not really very easy. It's about a willingness to change, and oftentimes to change and evolve away from what society tells us we should be, or we should believe, or we should do things, should. It's a terrible hammer to beat yourself up with. And specifically, our society's desire to push that social Darwinism, that survival of the fittest, you know, climb to the top of the heap and doesn't matter who you step on, dog eat dog world stuff. That's not what our faith is about. And so Paul then says in today's snippet from the letter to the church in Rome, he gives us practical advice. Let love be genuine. Hate evil, hold fast to what is good, love one another with mutual affection, try to outdo each other in showing honor, rejoicing in hope, practicing patience and suffering. I like practical advice, you know? I like practical advice. To really be there for ourselves and our brothers and sisters on the planet in the most authentic way we can be, not as know-it-alls, not as people that have to show how wonderful and good we are and all that, but as fallible human beings that frankly screw up left and right, and we're all in a process of learning. It's okay to be authentic with people. This is how we evolve, and this is how we learn to trust each other and also in God. To have an increase in religion was never about trying to be perfect religionists, you know. That's about churchianity. That's not about Christianity, right? But we're trying to be practitioners of remaining open and teachable. That's the hard stuff of being a follower of Christ, that we are learning to be open and teachable, that we're learning to look at our life and learn from our mistakes, our successes, our faithfulness, our lack of faithfulness, all of it. So I think it's great that Paul gives us many examples of kind of goals, what to shoot for, you know, and then when we don't quite make those goals, that's when we can look at ourselves. That self-reflection is so important to see where we're at on our particular spiritual journey so we can move on, move forward. In our gospel reading today, we get a glimpse of Jesus's suffering. It wasn't enough that secular and religious authorities dogged his every step. I mean, if you look at the life of Jesus and the ministry of Jesus, if that isn't a clear example of Jesus wanting true religion and the people of his day, particularly the religious leaders, wanting more religiosity, that's it. That's the clear example right there. So they dogged his every step until he got very little support for his mission and ministry to speak truth to power and offer practical advice to folks. Even his closest friends did not understand his mission completely. So Jesus himself gives practical advice and gets completely misinterpreted for thousands of years, for 2,000 to be exact. He says, if anybody wants to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. So what did humanity do with that practical advice? They turned it into a masochistic practice of whipping themselves, starving themselves, kneeling for long hours. Some of them I know from one lady, friend of a friend, who was a nun. I think it was a Dominican order, and they were told to put a crown of thorns around their thighs, under their habits, as they crawled on their knees praying around their convent garden. That they thought was carrying their cross. In my humble opinion, all of this is wrong, just completely misinterpreted. So what does, in our day and age, for progressive Christianity, what does it mean to take up our cross and follow Christ in an age where if you wear a cross out in public, you get taken for a fundamentalist? I think the real meaning of the cross is to be open to transformation. I no longer, this is what I learned from my teachers, I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. That's what we're affirming when we make the sign of the cross. I remember as a kid in New York City, when I would ride the bus and we would pass any kind of church or any cemetery or anything. Oh my gosh, all the old people be going like this. It's almost like, I don't want to die, you know. But the point is that we are dying to our ego selves so that our evolved self, the Christ in us, can rise and manifest who we really are deep down under all the cultural baggage that we've adopted, you know, what we think we should be, kind of thing. So when I make the sign of the cross or I wear a cross, I'm not claiming in any way, shape, or form to be somebody who believes in the Bible literally. I wear a cross because I love God with all my body, heart, mind, and soul, and I believe that this life is soul school. Our little souls came here to learn, to evolve. And that's what this life is all about, transformation, even though sometimes it's incredibly painful. When I make the sign of the cross or I wear a cross, I'm not only claiming to be a follower of the way that Jesus taught, but I am being open and teachable to transformation. And I believe that with God's help, anybody can be transformed. I've seen people that you would think would never really amount to much of anything. And they made a decision to turn their life over in very practical ways, not just saying the right belief, you know, things, but really trying to be transformed, to be teachable, to try to live life in a different way. And I love all the ways that all the different faiths in our world teach that. It's done nothing but enhance my faith tradition. The other day on Facebook, I posted a quote from someone named Sri Ramakrishna, who was a Hindu mystic. And here's what he said. I mean, this is Christian. I mean, it's Christian, it's Jewish, all the mystics, they're all saying the same thing in a different religious dialect, let's say. So here's what he said. Kindle in me, O Lord, the blazing fire of faith to be the pole star of my life. O succor of the weak, fulfill my one desire. Then shall I bathe both day and night in the boundless bliss of thy love and utterly forget myself, O Lord, attaining thee. That's the Christian path. It's the Jewish path. It's the Muslim, Sufi path. It's not about rules and regulations. It's not about memorizing parts of the Bible. It's about being open to having a mad love affair with this being beyond imagining, God. For us as Christians, the Christ manifest in Jesus. Fall in love with Christ, to fall in love with God. It's also about being dedicated, really being dedicated to be teachable, to be open, to let go of all the ways we think we have to control people, places, things, our own life, and to let go and just be in the present moment and step out into the next moment in full faith that somehow God's love will take care of us. That prayer was not dedicated solely to a Hindu god, but the God of all creation. It does nothing but enhance my faith. When I watched Joseph Campbell's Power of Myth series, I mean, some people could get very threatened by that kind of thing, to know that there are many incarnation stories in many different religions. To me, it just enhances my faith that God is trying desperately to get in touch with us, that there is an energy of love out there in here, the reality we live in, trying to get in touch with us. My belief is that if something religious is about love, it has to be about God, which is why other faiths don't threaten my faith belief system, why the Power of Myth series didn't threaten my belief system. But all these things are tools helping me to evolve. And frankly, it's open to everybody, helping all of us to evolve. It's only when we get into that tribal religiosity stuff that we end up being horrible to each other. And we end up getting stuck, unteachable, very, what's the word for it anyway? But, just immovable, But the God of all creation is the one who speaks through love and transformation. And it's understood in different ways, let's face it, based on our culture that we grew up in. Now, I'm an empath, and what that means is I'm very sensitive to the feelings of myself and others. Unfortunately, that also means it takes me longer to get over emotional hurts than maybe for some other people. It's great for ministry, but transitions in life are sometimes hard. When I grieve, I really grieve. So I believe I tend to feel things longer, and perhaps for whatever reason. And as I've said many times, and boy, remember this, it's so helpful. Your greatest strength is oftentimes your greatest weakness. Boy, if that doesn't teach you something about yourself, right? So I, for one, continually need transformation. I'm open for it. I really am. I don't want to suffer anymore. I'm tired of it. So I am open to suffering. Yes, Lord, just help me to be teachable. Help me to evolve. Help me to change. Help me to let go of the past so I can grow more fully into the likeness of Christ. So wearing a cross to me, or having an increase of religion, is a statement both to myself and to others. Frankly, I'm a work in progress. All of us are. I always think of that old saying, God ain't done with me yet. Thank God for that, right? God has asked us to cooperate. That's the big thing, right? Cooperate with this process of evolution, of learning how to give ourselves to divine love completely, and to love one another and ourselves as much as we possibly can. It is not an easy process, but if we can just learn to let go of the control mechanisms that we have learned to rely on, boy, that's when grace just sweeps in and takes us to that next level of deep faith, deep love, deep adoration. You know, devotion really is the quickest path to evolution, because if you love God so much, you're willing to change. That's everything. It's everything. So as we used to say in the 70s, keep on keeping on. Amen.